Imagine opening your door to find two men dressed like officers, pounding on your porch and threatening you with fake rules. They claim to be HOA security. But here's the twist. This neighborhood doesn't even have security. Their goal? To intimidate and scam innocent families. But what they didn't know was that inside this home lived a retired teacher and his son, a battle-hardened Navy SEAL. And when that SEAL stepped forward, the bully's entire plan came crashing down. The sharp command sliced through the calm of a Saturday morning like a knife. For Mr. Johnson, a retired schoolteacher in his late 60s, mornings were sacred. He usually enjoyed them with a hot cup of coffee on his porch, watching the sun climb over the rooftops and listening to the quiet hum of his neighborhood. But this morning was different. Instead of peace, there was pounding. Loud, steady knocks rattled the front door, each one carrying a weight of authority that felt strangely out of place. Mr. Johnson froze for a moment, the cup of coffee in his hand trembling slightly. He wasn't used to confrontations, but years of teaching had sharpened his instincts. Something about that voice, too harsh, too commanding, set off alarm bells in his mind. Curiosity pushed him toward the window. He carefully pulled back the blinds, just enough to peek outside. And there they were. Two men, tall and broad-shouldered, stood on his porch dressed in dark uniforms. On their backs, in bold block letters, the words HOA Security were splashed across cheap black jackets. At first glance, they might have passed for real officers. But the longer Mr. Johnson looked, the less sense it made. His neighborhood didn't have its own security force. The HOA meetings he'd attended were usually about lawn maintenance, trash schedules, and annual cookouts, not armed patrols. The thought of them hiring a private security team was not only laughable, it was suspicious. The men didn't look like community helpers either. They looked more like nightclub bouncers, thick arms crossed, dark sunglasses hiding their eyes even though the sun was barely up. Their stance wasn't friendly or professional. It was intimidating. Mr. Johnson's pulse quickened. Why were they at his door? What did they want? The pounding continued, more insistent this time. One of the men leaned forward, shouting again, "Sir, you're in violation of HOA rules. We need to speak with you immediately." Violation? That word stuck in his mind. His yard was neat, his fence freshly painted, his property taxes paid. He'd followed every guideline in the community handbook. What rule could they possibly be talking about? He tightened his robe around himself and stepped toward the door cautiously. The men's presence was heavy, like they owned the space in front of his house. They stood tall, wide-legged, fists tapping against their belts as if daring him to open up. Mr. Johnson hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He was a law-abiding man. He respected authority. But everything about this felt wrong. The fake professionalism, the cheap jackets, the way they knocked as if they were about to break the door down. In that moment, a chill ran through him. These weren't protectors of the neighborhood. They were predators, and their prey was him. He didn't know it yet, but the decision he made in the next few seconds, whether to open the door or stand his ground, would set off a chain of events that no one, not even those fake officers, could have predicted. When Mr. Johnson finally unlatched the door and cracked it halfway open, the tension on his porch erupted like a storm. He barely had time to speak before one of the men in the black HOA security jacket lunged forward with words sharp as knives. "You're violating HOA rules. Your fence and your shed need to come down, or else you'll face serious fines." The way he barked those words wasn't professional. It was hostile, like a thug demanding payment on a street corner. Mr. Johnson's eyebrows knit together in confusion. His fence was freshly painted, and his small garden shed had been standing for years without complaint. He knew the HOA handbook inside and out. There were no violations, at least none he had ever been notified of. The second man stepped closer, pulling a badge from his belt and flashing it for less than a second. It looked cheap, flimsy, the kind you could buy at a Halloween store. Mr. Johnson had seen real identification before. This wasn't it. "Do you have official paperwork?" he asked, his voice calm but steady. He wasn't about to be bullied on his own doorstep. The men exchanged a glance, and instead of answering, the one closest to him leaned in, invading his personal space. His breath was hot, his tone dripping with menace. "You don't want trouble, old man. Tear it down, or we'll make sure you regret it. The words hit Mr. Johnson like a slap. For the first time in years, he felt the same anxiety he used to see in his students when they were bullied. His chest tightened, his heart began to pound, and a rush of adrenaline surged through his veins. But beneath the fear, there was also anger. This was his home, his sanctuary. No one had the right to step onto his porch and talk to him like this. Still, he remained composed. He'd learned long ago that losing your temper in the face of aggression only gave bullies more power. He squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and kept his voice level. "I haven't broken any rules," he said firmly. "If you have official documents, I'll be happy to review them. Otherwise, this conversation is over." But the men didn't back down. One smirked, the other clenched his fists. Their act of authority was nothing more than performance, but a dangerous one, designed to intimidate and scare. What they didn't know was that Mr. Johnson wasn't as vulnerable as they thought. Upstairs, his son Marcus was unpacking a duffel bag. He had just returned home after serving overseas. Years of grueling training and high-stakes missions had molded him into a man who could spot danger instantly. And from the top of the stairs, Marcus had already heard enough. Every sharp word, every veiled threat, they carried downstairs into his ears like alarms. His father was being cornered, and Marcus wasn't about to let it continue. With quiet, deliberate steps, he began moving down the staircase. His presence was calm but commanding, like a storm building on the horizon. The fake HOA cops thought they were intimidating a retired teacher. What they didn't realize was that behind that door stood a U.S. Navy SEAL, a man trained to face real threats, far greater than anything they could muster. The balance of power was about to shift. Upstairs, Marcus had been unpacking his duffel bag, folding clothes with the kind of precision that never left him after years in the Navy. He wasn't even fully settled back into civilian life yet, but the tone drifting up from downstairs made his instincts flare. That wasn't the sound of neighbors having a disagreement. It was the sound of intimidation. Marcus's ears sharpened. His father's polite voice was being trampled by harsh demands. The words, "Tear it down, and you'll regret it," rang loud and clear. In that instant, his military training, honed by years of high-stakes missions overseas, snapped into place. He didn't rush. That wasn't his style. Instead, Marcus moved with deliberate precision, each step down the staircase quiet, but heavy with purpose. His breathing slowed, his focus narrowed. This wasn't combat, but the principles were the same. Assess the threat, control the situation, protect the innocent. When Marcus finally stepped into the doorway, the air shifted. He didn't need to raise his voice or puff out his chest. His presence spoke louder than any words. Broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and calm as stone, Marcus looked like a man who had seen danger far greater than two imposters on a porch. The so-called HOA enforcers froze. For a split second, their facade cracked. They had come expecting to intimidate an elderly man living alone. Instead, they found themselves face-to-face with someone whose quiet authority made their own act look laughable. Marcus's voice cut through the tension, low but commanding. "Is there a problem here?" The two men shifted uncomfortably. One, trying to salvage the act, puffed out his chest and snapped, "This is HOA business. Stay out of it." His words carried none of the confidence they had minutes earlier. Marcus didn't blink. He stepped forward, closing the distance by just a few feet, his eyes locked on theirs like a hawk sizing up prey. His father watched from the side, a mixture of pride and relief on his face. "If this was real HOA business," Marcus said slowly, each word heavy with authority, "you'd have paperwork, you'd have IDs, and you sure wouldn't be threatening my father on his own porch." He let the silence hang for a beat, his gaze unflinching. Then, in a tone colder than steel, he added, "Now, I'll ask you one last time, who sent you?" The shift was immediate. The intimidation they had carried with them, the sharp voices, the aggressive stance, evaporated under Marcus's calm pressure. Their bluff was unraveling, and they knew it. The taller of the two men glanced nervously at his partner, who swallowed hard and avoided eye contact. Marcus didn't need to raise his fists or shout. His presence alone was enough to dismantle their act. Years of discipline had taught him that true strength wasn't about noise. It was about control. And right now, he controlled every inch of that porch. The two imposters had come to intimidate, but now, for the first time, they were the ones who looked afraid. The two men, who only minutes earlier had spoken with booming confidence, now stumbled over their own words. Their voices wavered, their once steady hands twitched nervously at their sides. The illusion of authority they had wrapped themselves in was falling apart piece by piece under Marcus's piercing stare. Marcus didn't miss a thing. He saw the way their badges glinted under the sunlight, cheap, flimsy plastic, with stickers slapped on the front. He noticed the uneven stitching of their jackets, the way their posture sagged now that the bluff had been called. These weren't officers. They weren't even legitimate security guards. They were frauds, and worse, they were cowards. "You picked the wrong house," Marcus said, his voice steady, resonant, and impossible to ignore. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The men froze. Marcus didn't need to raise his voice. The conviction behind his words carried more weight than any shouted threat ever could. He wasn't trying to intimidate them. He was stating a fact, and that fact cut through their bravado like a blade. Marcus took a deliberate step forward, out onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked under his boots as he squared himself between his father and the imposters. He stood tall, shoulders broad, every inch of his body radiating calm dominance. In that moment, he wasn't just a son defending his father. He was a protector drawing a clear line that would not be crossed. The men faltered. One muttered weakly, "We're just doing our job." But the words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. The other man had already started edging backward toward the street, his eyes darting between Marcus and the getaway car parked at the curb. But Marcus wasn't about to let them slink away without accountability. He reached calmly into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and with one quick motion, raised it in front of them. The small red dot of the camera app glowed as he hit record. "Smile for the camera," Marcus said, his voice carrying a quiet, cutting edge. "You're impersonating officers and threatening a homeowner. That's a crime." The men froze again, this time in panic. Their bluff was shattered beyond repair. No longer could they hide behind false badges and harsh voices. Now, everything they did and said was being captured as evidence. One of them tried to shield his face with his hand, but it was too late. Marcus kept the phone steady, his eyes never leaving theirs. "Go ahead, keep talking. Explain on camera why you think it's okay to harass people in their own homes." The imposters didn't answer. Their bravado had crumbled into fear. In a flurry of nervous movements, they backed away from the porch, stumbling over their own excuses. Their words devolved into incoherent muttering as they scrambled for the car. Mr. Johnson watched in awe as the same men who had arrived full of threats and arrogance now fled like cornered rats. They dove into their vehicle, slammed the door shut, and with a screech of tires, sped off down the street, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. The neighborhood fell quiet again, the only sound the fading echo of their car engine. But the silence this time felt different, not tense, but victorious. Marcus lowered his phone, a small but satisfied smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The message was clear. Bullies may knock on the door, but when they're exposed for what they truly are, they run. After the two imposters sped away, the tension on the porch finally began to ease. Mr. Johnson let out shaky breath, his shoulders dropping as if a heavy weight had just been lifted. Marcus, still calm and collected, slipped his phone back into his pocket, but kept his eyes scanning the street, ensuring the threat was truly gone. "Let's get this reported," Marcus said firmly. His voice carried the same authority as before, but now it was directed at taking the next step, securing justice. Within minutes, Marcus had contacted the local police. He explained everything with military precision: how the men arrived, their fake badges, the threats they issued, and their hasty retreat once confronted. The dispatcher promised to send officers immediately. An hour later, 2 squad cars pulled up in front of the house. Uniformed officers stepped out, not with intimidation, but with professionalism and genuine concern. They sat with Marcus and Mr. Johnson on the porch, taking careful notes as both father and son recounted the encounter in detail. Marcus showed them the video he'd recorded, and the officers nodded gravely. "This isn't the first report we've had," one officer admitted. These guys have been targeting neighborhoods all over the county, pretending to be HOA enforcers. They trick homeowners into paying fake fines or scare them into making unnecessary changes. It's a scam, but with the evidence you've given us, we might finally have enough to shut them down. For Mr. Johnson, the realization was chilling. How many other families had been manipulated, bullied, or cheated out of their money? How many people had opened their doors, too trusting, too afraid, and given in to these frauds? The thought made his blood boil, but it also made him proud. Proud that his son had turned the tables, not only protecting their family, but helping uncover a scheme that had been preying on others. That night, after the officers left, the house was quiet again. Mr. Johnson sat across from Marcus at the kitchen table, the warm glow of the lamp illuminating his lined but dignified face. He looked at his son, not just as a Navy SEAL, but as the little boy he'd raised to stand up for what's right. "I spent my life teaching kids to believe in themselves," Mr. Johnson said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "to never let bullies win. Today, you showed me that lesson in the strongest way possible. You didn't just protect me. You reminded me why we must all stand tall." Marcus gave a small smile, his words simple but powerful. "Bullies are bullies, Dad. Whether they're in the schoolyard, wearing fake badges, or hiding behind lies, it's all the same. But when people know their rights, when they refuse to back down, those bullies lose every time." Word of the encounter spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors stopped by to thank Marcus and Mr. Johnson, some admitting they had been approached by similar imposters but hadn't known what to do. Families felt safer now, knowing someone had taken a stand. The HOA even issued a community-wide alert, warning residents about scams and encouraging them to call the police if they suspected foul play. For Mr. Johnson, the entire ordeal became more than just a frightening experience. It became a reminder. Justice isn't always about courts, judges, or laws written on paper. Sometimes, justice is about courage. It's about unity. It's about refusing to let fear steal away your dignity. And thanks to Marcus, their neighborhood had been reminded of exactly that. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories, just like this one. And make sure to tap the notification bell, so you never miss when a new video drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.